Hey everyone, Ryan here, and welcome to another episode of Awesome Games We Playin', and today we're going to be talking about Dragon Quest X version 6. I said I was going to do a big, long Dragon Quest X version 6 review for my other review show, Awesome Video Game Memories, like I did with Dragon Quest X versions 1 through 5, and then after that I said I was quitting long-term reviews, but I decided I'll still talk about games in the shorter form review show, and I know a lot of you want to know what my thoughts on Dragon Quest X version 6 are, so here they are. When I first started playing Dragon Quest X in 2020, I heard that version 5 was going to be the last part and it does wrap up everything nicely, but what I didn't understand at the time that it was actually the last part of the first major arc of Dragon Quest X, which we refer to as the sibling arc. Like anyone who plays Final Fantasy XIV, the Hydaelyn and Zodiark arc, was the first major story arc from A Realm Reborn and concluded in Endwalker, so Dragon Quest X versions 1 through 5 are the equivalent of that. Also, I didn't understand how long-term MMO games told their story arcs, so now I know, and this is why we have 10 million World of Warcraft expansions. So I felt that Dragon Quest X versions 1 through 5 were a nice cohesive whole, and things wrapped up perfectly at the end of version 5, although some loose version 4 stuff does get wrapped up in version 6. So does version 6 meet the standards set by its predecessors? I'll say yes and no. First of all, I think we do have an amazing new cast of characters and a cool new world to explore, and from versions 6.0 to 6.2, version 6 is going in a much darker direction, pretty much a lot like Dragon Quest VII with its more moody atmosphere, and I really liked how version 6.0 to 6.2 really covered the theme of the darkness in people's souls, and it seems like the team that wrote Final Fantasy games wrote for Dragon Quest X versions 6.0 up to 6.2, and I was like, oh man, this must be what Dragon Quest XII is going to be like in its new darker direction, and it'll make the resolution for the characters much more sweet. However, it felt like by the time you got to 6.3, the writing team had a lot of disagreements on where the mood and the story was going to go, and then they brought things back to the happy-go-lucky nature of Dragon Quest, and not really in a good way in my opinion. I really felt the darker tone and material could have lasted a little bit longer to flesh things out for the conflicts of the characters, and would have brought us a more meaningful conclusion for them. And opinions on this are a bit mixed, but version 6 does kind of shoehorn extra stuff into the lore that we really didn't need, but it adds a lot more that we didn't know. And probably the highlight of version 6 is that it concludes a major part of version 4 that was left unsolved, but I felt it could have been put in version 5 so it still remained in the sibling arc of the story as a whole, so more time was made to focus on the newer version 6 characters and their dilemmas. And I also felt that the main villains of version 6 were the weakest and the least interesting out of all the versions, and I felt the villains of version 6 were really shoehorned in after we got a glimpse of the darkness of the characters' souls, and the version 6 villains kind of feel out of place in a Dragon Quest game. And does Dragon Quest X version 6 stick to the landing at the end and not crash off course? I'll definitely say yes, and most of the newer characters get the proper resolutions and send-offs, but I felt that some of them were kind of axed off from the story a bit too fast, without the depth that the other characters had when they were removed from the story in versions 1 through 5. I'll definitely say Dragon Quest X version 6 kind of suffers from a new arc syndrome, where the writers kind of felt like they did everything they could in versions 1 through 5, and had to find new ways to make it interesting, because in all honesty, in versions 1 through 5, the writers really brought the story pretty much everywhere it can go, so I can understand how much harder it is to continue and still make it interesting. The final battle of version 6 is good, but nowhere near as epic as version 5 was. And for the ending, well, it's different and has more endings than Lord of the Rings Return of the King. The ending definitely tells us that it's the start of a new arc and not the conclusion of this one. Regardless, version 6 is still a very solid entry in the Dragon Quest X story, and I obviously recommend playing it, and I hope in version 7 the writers stick with a more consistent tone and not rely too much on nostalgia, since version 6 kind of shoehorns a lot of that stuff in the past versions that we didn't really need, and I would have liked to see more fresh and new ideas, but the ending of version 6 is definitely related to something nostalgic, and I won't really get into it here. So with that said, I still recommend version 6, and you can find out how to play Dragon Quest X in full English with the links on my friend Seth's site, dqxabby.com, with ways to download the trial, translation tools, and how to pay for the full version. This is Ryan signing out, and later, Questers. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to check out these other videos, and also make sure to follow me on social media and check out the official Battle Geek Plus website. Take care.